Max Pensky. I'm the other co-director. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's great to see you all.
Dear guests, friends, students, and colleagues, on behalf of the Institute for Genocide and Mass Atrocity Prevention, we are delighted to welcome you all to the third annual Nadia Rubaii Memorial Prize ceremony. Established in 2023, this award is dedicated to the loving memory of IGMEP's founding co-director, who died unexpectedly in 2022. And we're very honored, as always, to have with us Nadia's family joining us for this ceremony. Sorry, sometimes I get a moment where it's been 3 years since we lost Nadia, but it hits you sometimes. In making this annual award, the IGMEP co-directors recognize an individual or organization that embodies the qualities of courage, compassion, and curiosity that Nadia embodied in her atrocity prevention work, her career in public administration, and in her personal life. Our inaugural award in 2023 recognized the Filipino journalist, human rights activist, and Nobel Peace Prize winner, Maria Ressa. Last year, we welcomed LGBTQ activist Frank Mugisha for his remarkable courage under extraordinarily difficult circumstances living in his native Uganda. This award also presents us with an opportunity to amplify the voices of those who are responding in creative and inspirational ways to some of the biggest challenges our world is facing today when it comes to atrocity prevention. While genocides and other atrocities are sadly all too prevalent across the globe today, none has dominated public consciousness so clearly in recent years as the attacks by Hamas on October 7th, 2023, and the subsequent ongoing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide against Palestinian civilians in Gaza at the hands of the Israeli government. No atrocity in recent memory has so clearly divided the world, asking each of us to declare where we stand, which side we choose. Given this reality, we've chosen to use this year's Nadia Rubaii Memorial Prize to recognize an organization that for decades has painted a different picture of what the future may look like for Israel and Palestine. In a world characterized by division, they offer an alternative vision of equal dignity, unity, and peace. This year, we at IGMEP have the distinct honor of recognizing Parents Circle Family Forum, an Israeli-Palestinian organization that for 35 years has united Israeli and Palestinian families who have lost their loved ones to the ongoing violence and has worked tirelessly to create conditions for peace, tolerance, and reconciliation in a region that has come to symbolize intractable conflict and ongoing atrocities. We know, and our students know, that atrocities are processes, not events. The conditions that make atrocities more likely can stretch across years or decades, and one of those conditions is othering, emphasizing differences that separate one social group from all others, and insisting that these differences outweigh what we have in common. Othering is a nearly universal psychological feature in societies that are moving toward increasing polarization and scapegoating. Unfortunately, it contributes powerfully to the dehumanization of targeted groups, itself a powerful predictor of political authorities justifying and normalizing lethal violence against civilians as policy.
But like all stages of the process of atrocity, othering is neither inevitable nor irreversible. Calls for othering and dehumanization of social groups are almost without exception loud. They work psychologically by flooding the zone with volume, simplification, and repetition. Countering those calls and reclaiming what we hold in common never reaches the same decibel level. Rehumanizing the people who political leaders frame as enemies is always far more nuanced and far quieter work. It is also deeply personal work and is made of stories and not labels. Rehumanization requires risk, vulnerability, and exposure that othering does not. But it's just these things that make rehumanization such a powerful tool, strong enough to overwhelm the voices clamoring for otherness for all of their noise. If atrocities are processes, then there are multiple points where those processes can be interrupted and redirected, even when, especially when, atrocities are ongoing. Rehumanization interrupts and redirects the drivers of the processes of atrocity. Today, we recognize Parent Circle Families Forum as a rehumanizer. The Israeli and Palestinian families within that circle all belong to a social group that no one would ever want to join or should ever have to. These are families whose daily reality is the absence of somebody they love. Their children, their brothers and sisters, and their parents died violently and should not have. These families in Parent Circle Families Forum have all made the choice to draw on their loss and their grief to change their societies, to create conditions for durable peace and reconciliation under extraordinarily difficult conditions. They have decided to transmute their shared grief into shared hope. Since 1995, Parent Circle Families Forum has created spaces for dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians, enabling them to tell one another their stories, to listen to alternative narratives, and to rediscover their own common humanity. As you can imagine, these dialogues are not easy. After October 7th, 2023, there was reason to fear that they would have simply become impossible. And indeed, following the attacks, the Israeli Ministry of Education banned the organization from running their programs in public schools. But Parent Circle Families Forum just kept going. The courage that this work requires, given the current realities in Gaza and Israel, is difficult to comprehend given the hostility that these families have faced and continue to face as they insist on rehumanizing one another. Curiosity about one another, about different narratives and different experiences, is fundamental for the basic recognition of shared humanity. It's the opposite of othering. The compassion that turns grief into hope is perhaps the rarest gift of all. Courage and curiosity are closely related qualities, and they mutually strengthen each other. When they are pursued with compassion and with hope, they become a formidable power, one that is more needed than ever. On its own, listening to other people's stories has never stopped a single bomb from falling. And as we gather here now in safety this afternoon, bombs continue to rain down on defenseless civilians, Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Their appalling suffering at the hands of the Netanyahu government must end, and it must end now, a demand that the majority of Israelis actually share. While storytelling and rehumanization by themselves will not bring about an end to atrocities, it's impossible to imagine a lasting, stable, peaceful coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians without them. That's what makes them so crucial. And so we welcome Robi, Damelin, and Sima Mohammed, Awad to recognize them and their organization for their extraordinary work and to listen to their stories. We are therefore honored to award the 2025 Nadia Rubaii Memorial Prize to Parent Circle Families Forum.
So I'm so glad that Nadia's family are here. I remember her nagging me and nagging me to do a week with the Parent Circle. How extraordinary that was. You should be very proud. You really should. And thank you so much for creating that person. Thank you, Matt, also. And thank you all for coming and listening. I want to introduce you to a very special person. She's standing here next to me. I've known her since she was, if you were South African, you would say, this big. And she used to wait outside her house in Beit Omar, mainly for the sweets that I brought. And it's so wonderful that her mother joined the Parent Circle, and she will tell you about that. And she's the next generation, and that's the hope. It's rather weird and ironic that we come and bring hope to you when it should be the other way around. Sima,
Yes.
go for
Can
it,
I
babe.
take this?
Yes.
Hello, everyone.
Wait,
Is
I
it
want
loud?
to say something extraordinary. That Sima, for the very first time in her life, flew in an aeroplane, came to America, spoke. This is probably the second time she's spoken to an audience like this. So she needs a hand of applause first.
Thank you all. I think it's so loud. Okay. Okay. So thank you all for coming. I think it's loud. Thank you all for coming. I'm Sima. I'm 19 years old. I live in West Bank. Yeah. I have 3 sisters and let's say 4 brothers, but I lost my older brother when he was 17 years old by Israeli sniper. He was protect a house from bombing. He was up the house, and he got a shot on his stomach, and it's up to his heart, so he died immediately. My mom married when she was 14 years old. So you can imagine, he was the light of her life, and she was living and laughing for him, and she was giving love for all of us because of him. And when we lost him, our life turns upside down, and I lost the connection between my family, especially with my mom. She forgot how to be a mother for her children, and that's made me grow up with full of sadness and grief, full of black, full of tears. You can imagine that. I think so. And that make me think, am I the only child who grew up with this grief and this sadness? And if this is fair for children, it's not. I think so. After a few years of this grief and this sadness and this situation, my mom friend told her that there is a women's circle. They spoke to each other, they shared their grief together. And she said, yes, I'll came here. But when my mom went there, she saw Robi. And she said, no, I'm not gonna sit here. I'm not gonna talk to her. She's Israeli, and Israel killed my son. And they took my happiness. But we stopped her and told her that she's also a mother who lost her son, and she can feel her, and she wants to listen to her. And she asked her to show her a picture of David. And when she saw the picture, they started to cry. And my mom realized that there is no Palestinian or Israeli in a grave or in mother. They are just mothers who lost their sons. And that moment, my mom realized that this is not fair, and she doesn't want to lose us because she lost her son. So she started to remake the connection between us, but we can't forget him, of course. And she, Robi invited her to join parent circle. She went there, and our neighbors told her or asked her, "Are you buying your son blood? Are you serious?" And she said, "Actually, no. I am sell my other blood, my other son's blood. I don't want more lose, and I don't want more grief. I had enough of that. I need to make change in my life and in my son's life." And after a few years, when I was 14 years old, my mom told me that there is a summer camp. There's Palestinian and Israeli children in there. And this was my first time meet Israeli side. I was afraid to go there, but I went there for one reason, to blame them why I grow up with this grief, why I don't have a childhood, and why I don't have a connection with my family, especially with my mom, and why they killed my brother. He didn't do anything. But when I went there, I realized that they are children. They are children. They don't think of killing or blood or grief. They just want play, have a lunch. They are children, you know? After this summer camp, I joined a parent circle, and I went there every summer. And I thought that life will be much better, you know? I thought I was having hope so much, but the war has begun, and I become hopeless because I couldn't went to the summer camp in 2023. And I graduated from high school in 2023, so I couldn't apply to my university for a whole year. Then the last summer camp, I wanna tell the story. The last summer camp, I had a friend who called Tamam. I wish I could let you watch a clip about him, but I couldn't. So I had a friend who called Tamam. He was such a nice man. He was laughing around us. He was always give us a hope and love and make us so much laughing. We were tired of laughing with him. But suddenly, one day, my friend called me and he said, "We lost Tamam in bombing in Jenin." I can't believe it. Like, I told him, "I'm not believing you. This is joke. This is no, impossible." But we really lost him in Jenin. And yeah, this is my life and this is my situation. Thank you all.
Ah, so where to start? What makes you look for some other way? You probably by now recognize I was not born in Israel. South Africa was where I was born. And I was looking to think, how did I get to be this survivor? And where did the social justice start? And so I'll tell you a little story. I like to tell stories. When I was 5, we lived in South Africa, in Johannesburg, then called Johannesburg. And there used to be a man who delivered the milk with a horse and cart. And he used to beat the horse. And I'm a big animal lover. So I became very furious and I enlisted my friend Barbara and we went and we stole the horse. And we brought the horse home to my house and we put it in the tennis court. And then my father came home, and you can imagine how thrilled he was, and sent me to boarding school after that. So something started there, this survival tactic, because I was very naughty in the boarding school, which was this very British boarding school. And so they asked if my parents could take me out of the school, and they sent me to a convent. So a nice Jewish girl in a convent, which was quite extraordinary. I actually thought it would be much better to be Catholic. It was more fun. You had all water and holy water, and going to synagogue on Saturday wasn't fun at all. So I was in the anti-apartheid movement, but to tell the truth, I did it to annoy my parents, and I was not in the same place that I am today. And thinking, for me, October the 7th was very similar to when David was killed. I had this immediate feeling that I have to do something. I have to change the world. This is my 7th time in America since October the 7th. And I wanted to connect what happened to me by understanding and what happened on the 7th of October. Because I think when you understand, that's the beginning of a conversation. And so when the army came to tell me that David had been killed by a Palestinian sniper, one of my first reactions apparently was, you cannot kill anybody in the name of my child. And that was very prophetic about what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I knew almost immediately that I wanted to do something to prevent mainly mothers from experiencing this pain. This is a pain that doesn't go away. You learn to live with it next to you, and you make a choice. What will you do with that? And so the Parent Circle found me because I spoke at a huge demonstration to get out of the occupied territories. And they invited me to come to a weekend in East Jerusalem to meet other bereaved families. And I remember sitting around a table, just almost like the table in front of me, and looking into the eyes of the Palestinian mothers and recognizing that we shared the pain, the same pain. And that if we together could stand on a stage and talk for reconciliation and non-violence, then surely that would be an example for everybody. And so I closed my office, and this organization took over my life. And I started to travel all over the world. I have not the faintest idea where I've been. I promise you, if you ask me in 2 days what was the hotel like, I would not know. So I thought I was tremendously important. I could speak English, I could answer the questions, and I could spiel about love and peace and all of that stuff. And one night I was sitting next to my computer and there was a knock on the door. And I opened the door and there were 3 soldiers standing there. When there are 3 soldiers, it can only mean one thing. And I just could not bear to think that I lose another child. So I kept slamming the door in their face and they kept knocking. And eventually I opened the door and they said, we came to tell you that we caught the man that killed David. That's when it became difficult. You see, you can go around the world and talk about all of these things, but do you actually really mean it? And this was really a difficult time to see if I had the integrity to do this work and would I walk the talk. It took me about 3 months and I wrote a letter to the family of Thaya, that's the name of the man who killed David. And I told them about the parent circle and our long-term vision. You know, all the work that we do on the ground is geared towards creating a framework for a reconciliation process to be an integral part of any political future agreement. Because we've signed all kinds of agreements, right? But the people were never involved. So the work that we do on the ground, which I'll talk about tomorrow, because I can go on talking till tomorrow morning. Cory Booker's got nothing on me. So I don't even know what I was saying. And I also told the family about David. He was a student at Tel Aviv University, and he was studying for his master's in the philosophy of education. And he was in the peace movement. And you know, you don't know who the person is behind the gun. And he used to also play the French horn, which was the worst thing that could happen to any mother. Believe me, it's not funny. And when he was called to go to reserves, he came to talk to me and he said, look, I don't know what to do. I don't want to serve in the occupied territories. But if I don't go, what happens to my students? Because he was teaching philosophy to kids who were going to be inducted into the army. Is that the right example? And if I don't go, what happens to my soldiers? Because he was the officer. And he said, and if I do go, I will treat people with dignity. And so will all my soldiers. And you know, I was filled with a sense of dread, but he went. And only 3 years later, I understood. There was a man sitting, I was at the American Embassy in Tel Aviv doing a talk, something like this. And there was a Palestinian sitting in the audience and he kept looking at me. And you know, some people are a bit scared to talk to bereaved parents, or maybe they're just scared of me because I am quite scary. And I said, what? And he said, I want to tell you that the day before your son was killed, I drove through that checkpoint. And he came to the car and he said, I have to look at your papers. I'll do it as fast as possible. It's like paying income tax. And we got into a conversation. And when I heard the next day that your son was killed, I was so sorry. That is the essence of the work that we are doing, is to see the humanity in the other. It's not to be a huge expert on the Middle East. It really isn't, because I promise you, if I ask this audience, I don't know how many of you could tell me the names of some of the children that died in Gaza. Think about that. This is the human consequence of madness of war. It's who the people are. You know, I'm just going off on a tangent, but I just remembered that I saw this wonderful clip on one of those awful social media things, and it was of a little boy holding a cat in Gaza. And he wouldn't go into the taxi to go to the south if his parents wouldn't take the cat. And there was this whole argument about taking the cat and not taking, and they took the cat with the little boy. And 2 days later, one of the hostage girls came out of the hostage holding her little dog, Bella. And I thought to myself, this is mad. This is the consequence of war. Sima is the consequence of war. So am I. And so I then started from it took a while for me to understand all of this, to understand how was it possible for this man who killed 10 people, including my son, how did he get to that point? It's not about condoning, it's about understanding, because that could be the beginning of a conversation. It took 3 years, I got a letter back from Thaya, in which he said I was crazy. I kind of already knew that, and that I should stay away from his family, and that he killed 10 people to free Palestine. But I knew that when he was a little boy, his parents told us that when he was a very small child, he saw his uncle violently killed by the Israeli army. And he also lost 2 further uncles in the second uprising. So I think he went on the path of revenge. That doesn't condone anything, but that's the fact. And so I started to think on October the 7th, how could Hamas have done what they did? And then I suddenly thought, wait a minute. If I was 12 and I was growing up in Gaza and every 2 years there would be a war and I would watch my mother running away and we didn't have a shelter and she couldn't protect me or my siblings and I didn't have freedom of movement and I didn't have hope. So what kind of adult will I grow up to be? You see, reconciliation is also about telling the truth. It's not just a pretty word. It's not easy for me to be part of a community or to be part of it as an Israeli. I'm part of the system. And so then I thought about the kids on the kibbutzim surrounding. They're coming to get us. I thought about the kids on the kibbutzim, they thought their life was they were invincible. Nothing could happen to them. Of course, they had rockets, but they had shelters. And they lived in this beautiful surrounding. And then the 7th of October happened. And that was all shattered. I don't know, I went to the south because I think when you talk about things, you have to be witness. And I saw the consequence of what happened on October the 7th. And it was horrific, And then I suddenly thought, wait a minute, what about the kids? The trauma that they must have now. And what about the kids that live in the villages and towns around Gaza, Sderot, Ashkelon, Ashdod? How they've been, since they were tiny, having rockets shot at them. And they wet their beds at the age of 12 because that's trauma. So we have so much work to do, And when you begin to understand how people behave in a certain manner, you can't kill the idea. You can only change the circumstance. And the miracle of this whole madness that's going on, and it's the darkest period that I can remember. The whole miracle is that we have 80 new members from October the 7th, some of them whose parents were burned to death on Kibbutz Be'eri, and one of them is now the director on our board, is the chairman of our board, and the other one is the son of Vivian Silva, who also was a dear friend who was burnt to death. And I look at Musa, who lost 60 members of his family in Gaza, and he stayed, and only 3 families have left. That's quite amazing. Now, I want to tell you about something else, but I'm not going to because I think we have to shut up now, or not? No? Okay, so what am I doing in America 7 times, right? Straight after the war, we started to get hundreds and hundreds of phone calls and people turning to us to do dialogue meetings, to do Zoom and Gloom, just to bring the message, to bring some hope. Suddenly, and it's not possible we have members, a lot, 800 families, but not very many speak good English or do these meetings. And even if they could, we still wouldn't have been able to supply the demand. And so when the World Bank phoned me, this was like the limit. If the World Bank has to have Robi Damelin come to do a workshop because the Jewish staff are not talking to the Muslim staff, that's pretty pathetic, I think. But it was an excuse to go to Georgetown University, who have actually been our mentors for many, many years. So we went to Georgetown. If we've got time, I'll tell you a little story about Georgetown. I warned you. I went with a Palestinian man who's a nurse. His name is Mohammed Abu Jafar. And the then president of Georgetown was sitting between us at a dinner. And I looked at Mohammed and I said, wow, you should come and study here. He lives in Jenin. I promise you, that's not fun. I said, you must come and study here. And Joya said, I can make that happen. And he's there now on a full scholarship for a year. And I'm so happy. You never know what comes out of your mouth, what the result will be. But at the same time, we asked if he could help us to create an online program for people who wanted us to do dialogue meetings. And he said, yes, of course. So we made this program, which is called Listening from the Heart. And it's 3 dialogue meetings together with question and answer and a manual which Georgetown helped us create for the facilitator, which also has all the methods that you can use and how you can debrief and what you can use and what you needn't use. And then the teachers union, I went to Texas, believe it or not. I shouldn't say that. Great barbecue. But the Teachers Federation had a meeting there and they endorsed this program. And then we launched it at NYU, and NYU fell in love with the parent circle and invited 40 young members, Sima's age. She didn't get a visa for some mad reason, to go to Prague to be together with the 40 Palestinian and Israeli members, Sima's age. And they sent students from NYU, Jewish and Muslim students, to work with them. It was amazing. So their next meeting is going to be in June. And of course, the kids who came from NYU are now ambassadors for this message. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, so Robi and Sima have been generous enough to open the floor, and if anyone would like to ask any questions, we can do that. Anyone? Yeah, Sandy.
What brought you from South Africa to Israel?
I think I jumped from the frying pan into the fire, more or less. But I had no intention of staying in Israel. In 1967, I came in the Six-Day War to save Israel and ended up working in a chicken house. That was my great contribution to the war. And then I sort of got married and stayed. I had no intention. And South Africa was really quite pleased to see the back of me.
Sima, I'd love to hear about how things are going with your plans for university. I mean, what are the options for you going forward for continuing your education?
Actually, I don't think of that seriously, but I've seen some universities here in New York and LA. So I've been thinking, choose one of them. Of course. It's the best choice.
Maybe one of the questions that should have been asked, which nobody asked, and this is the most serious problem, is the West Bank. Nobody's speaking about the West Bank. Do you know what that's like? That's a cauldron. There's no freedom of movement. When Sima wants to go to her university or to study, there are now gates. Instead of just having checkpoints, there are now also gates, which are not manned all the time. So you could stand there for 2 or 3 hours and wait. And most of the men who worked in Israel can't come because there's the closure. And so the economic situation is dire. The children are not going to school regularly. So there's no freedom of movement, and that's a basic human right. So we need to look at those settlers who are running rampant without any accountability. All of these things are very difficult for me to say. but that's the truth.
I have a question. Can you tell us what those of us outside of the context of being in Israel or Palestine need to know that we don't know when we're talking about and thinking about and watching the news and having protests and all of this? What do you wish that we all knew that we don't know? And what should we be doing that we're not doing?
What we've been saying on campuses all over America is, why don't you do some research to the students and find an NGO in Palestine or in Israel that you can identify with. It doesn't have to be the Parent Circle. It can be Combatants for Peace. It can be Breaking the Silence. It can be Women Wage Peace. Find an organization that speaks to you and start to support them. I'm not talking about only money. Of course, money helps, but I'm talking about moral support. Much of what the conversation was about this morning is about being lonely. We are very alone, and we need that support. You know, when I wrote an op-ed to free the man who killed David if it will bring back a hostage, you cannot imagine how much anger came out of that. So there are things, and I'm a tough old girl, so, you know, it's not a problem, but people are living in terribly difficult circumstances. I don't know if you even begin to understand what it's like to live with rockets. Outside my house, fortunately, I've got a cat who goes to the safe room, and then I hear the siren. So all of this living in this madness, you know, what do you choose? Now I'm going to give you a challenge. Can I? Okay, on the 29th of April is Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day for soldiers in Israel. The Parent Circle, together with Combatants for Peace, have a wonderful program at night, or on the eve, which is like 8 o'clock Israel time. I don't know what the time will be for you, 7 hours less, right? That you invite the whole school, and especially the students who are feeling angry and don't know where to put that anger. Let them listen to Liat Asili, who was kidnapped and whose husband was killed and he's still in Gaza. Let them listen to Musa, who lost 40 members of his family. Let them listen to all of the beautiful music and the poetry and things that we do on that night. Maybe that will make change. And don't do it in a threatening way. Just ask them, come and watch this with me. It's something that I'm interested in. Yes, can you do that?
Can you remind us how you do that?
It's online, and it has English subtitles, and you just can tune in. I will send you the link. Okay? At least I won't send you the link because I'm useless at that, but I'll ask Leo.
Anything, Sima? Yeah, in the back. Frank.
Thank you. I want to thank both of you for the incredible work that you are doing. I'm just wondering, when you bring people together in family circles, people who have lost so much and in grief, how do you get people from a position of grief to one of understanding so that in your own words, you can start a conversation? I'm just wondering what you tell people who have lost so much and have come to listen to you. Thank you.
So maybe I tell you the story of Bushra. Okay, she told, I think that Sima told you the story of her mother who came to this meeting. And the way that we work is through storytelling. You would find it very difficult not to empathize with Sima, having heard her story, right? And probably the same for me. So that's the way. Where are you? Where's he gone? That's more or less the way that we work is through the personal story, because that's what makes an emotional breakthrough. And once we realize that the pain is the same, look, if I cry, what color are my tears? You know, and once you realize that, and also when you realize the force that you can be for change, it's quite extraordinary. You know, I almost am so grateful for so many of the things that I've been able to do, for being a part of somebody's life to make change, you know, from hatred and from anger. And there's so much anger in Israel and Palestine now, and so much fear and so much trauma. There's so much work to be done, you know, really. That was a short answer.
Anyone else? Mati.
Is there any society or country outside of Israel and Palestine that is in any way helping to resolve the conflict between the two people?
I don't see any country that is actually helping to resolve the problem. Either they are pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, importing our conflict, and maybe, I don't know, if you listen to the news, we had a meeting 2 days after the war began, and I'm just thinking what news does, you know? We had a meeting with all of our staff. We are 20 staff, and we have office in Beit Jala, which is in the West Bank, and in Tel Aviv. And we have two of everything. We have two women directors with a stress on the word women. And we have two people in charge of education and all the work that we do, speakers, whatever we do, there are two of us. Nobody signs a check without the other. Nobody can make a program without the other. This is not easy. Don't make any mistake, but it's respect. That famous word that somebody used today. So when the war began, you, my South African friend there, when we had the first meeting on Zoom, it was terrifying because everybody had seen their own media. So that's like Fox News and CNN, but even more polarized. And so I was worried in a way. And there was a lot of pain in that meeting and a lot of anger. But I realized that we all sat and listened with empathy, even if we didn't agree. Because if you'd heard the two medias, that's a parallel universe. And so that's a real sign of trust. I don't know why the hell I was saying all of that. Why was I saying that? Oh, you asked. What did you ask?
Well, please join me in thanking the recipients of this year's Nadia Rubaii Memorial Prize.